What is going on, guys? It is DMG here, and today we are going to be taking a look at a formation along with the instructions and tactics that go along with it about how to break down someone who is parking the bus, because I'll be honest, I've had it up to about here with players who are just sitting back constantly.
Oh wow, look at me, I'm so good because I can use the 4-2-2 formation, have everyone come back on the defense besides my two strikers, park the bus, not do anything, do a driven pass to one of the strikers, then do a through ball to one of the other strikers. I'm so good, I'm so good, look at me, I just went 15-5 in the foot champs weekend league because that's all I did because I had 2 shots and then 2 goals off of 2% possession. Look at me, I'm so good.
You can clearly tell that I have lost my mind, so hopefully in order to prevent you guys from losing your minds, this video will help you. I also have a stream deck that makes those sounds now. I'm a professional. So to show you guys the team that I was using, this is who we have. Now, it's obviously a pretty solid team, right? We obviously have Baby Eto in here. We have some overpowered players like Fakir, Mendy, there's PK in here. But, you know, we have some of the Japanese guys with King Kazu, Nakamura. There's Tonali, who's a little off chem as well. We have Unai Simon in goal because Ter Stegen is the worst goalie in the game. So yes, it is a good team, but it's not one of like the best teams ever. So I can assure you it's not necessarily just the team itself making these tactics and making this formation works. So the formation in question is going to be the 4-1-2-1-2 narrow. It is a narrow formation that I'm kind of using not necessarily for the first time ever because it was incredibly overpowered a few years ago, but it is a narrow formation that I'm kind of using relatively, you know, kind of for the first time in the last maybe FIFA like year or so, just because narrow formations I think overall for me have not been great, but this one has been a lot better just because it also provides 2 strikers, a center attacking mid, it provides some width, it provides some cover in the center, and I think overall it can be really good, especially at breaking down players who park the bus. So like with every tactic and instructions video, we're going to start out with the tactics, instructions, we'll go over the types of players you're going to need, and then of course we'll go over some gameplay. So if you do have any other questions, let me know down in the comments, but without further ado, let's get into this video. Starting off with the tactics, we have the defense starting off with balanced on the defensive style, 40 width and 60 depth. Now the width you may see and just kind of be wondering why it's so narrow, especially when it is already a narrow formation. We shouldn't really need that, but in my experience I do tend to think it's a little bit better just to be a little bit more narrow, since a lot of players do not tend to cross the ball anymore, right? It's not FIFA 19 where people are doing flick up crosses. People are just going to be trying to go through the middle, so it's pretty much as compact as we can be through the middle, the better. And then for the depth, essentially that's just so then some of the center mids can come back and kind of help us, and then that way there's not like a huge gap between the defense and the midfield. Now for the build-up play, I've recently really just liked balance because I feel as though slow build-up, fast build-up, and long ball can essentially just kind of really hinder your attack more than it can help, in the sense that slow build-up you can't counter as fast as you want to in certain instances, whereas fast build-up and long ball, your left and right backs will go up and play left and right wings when you really don't really want them to, like ever. Like when should that ever happen? But they do that anyway because FIFA. So I've personally noticed that balance tends to be a little bit better for the build-up play. Now for the chance creation, I do think direct passing is pretty good. I will say that there are times where left and right back do push up, like I mentioned, for like build-up play. If it was on fast build-up, sometimes they get forward a little bit too far. However, that's if you know, go all the way forward into like the striker and go into the box and you pass it all the way back. Typically that's not going to happen, so you shouldn't have to worry about it too much. For the width, I have it at 55. Now the reason why I want it a little bit more wide is that one, it's already a narrow formation. We don't necessarily need to go any more narrow, but along with that, I think the strikers who have really good, you know, pace and attack positioning tend to make diagonal runs a little bit more, because what'll happen is you obviously go a little bit wider out, and then the strikers are going to be making those runs inside. So personally, I do think a little bit wider is pretty good because again, you get more diagonal runs from the strikers. Lastly, for the players in the box, I have it at 5. Now I have tried 6 and 7, and I also have tried 3 and 4. all of them actually have their place. I just found that 5 is just kind of a perfect balance between those two things. So like I mentioned, 6 and 7 for players in the box is actually sometimes a good thing. So for example, when your opponent is parking the bus, but they're not sitting back deep, they have a decently high line. I noticed that if you have it on 6 or 7, you're going to be making a lot of runs in behind, which can be very helpful. However, it can be bad sometimes because if your opponent is sitting back very deep, then the box is going to be very congested, and it's going to be very tough to get off a shot without someone blocking it, whether it's your opponent or one of your teammates. And then also for 3 and 4 players in the box, that can be very good as well, because when your opponent is sitting back very deep, if you only have 3 or 4 players in the box, that means that the box is going to be a lot less crowded. Your own players just moving and creating a lot more space, and then hopefully it's going to be a little bit easier for you to actually get a shot off rather than the box being crowded. However, that will also mean that there are times where your center mids do not make runs forward when they essentially should be. So again, I think 5 is kind of that perfect balance, that perfect mixture. However, don't hesitate to change it to 6 or 7 or to 3 or 4 in a certain instance in the game. I think the players in the box is going to be the biggest thing to take away from this tactics section, because it is going to determine how many players are in the box for you, and essentially going to be how potent your attack is. So again, keep it at 5 for now, but again, don't be afraid to change it to 6 or to 4, lower it, higher it, whatever you need to do in order to make your attack a little bit better and more efficient. Now on to the instructions part of the video. So starting out, we do have the goalie. Obviously on comes for crosses and sweeper keeper, that's just what you tend to do for virtually everything. But then for the defense, we have every single defender just on the default and balanced tactics. Now for the center backs, that should not come as any surprise, but for the left and right backs, it might be, because typically when you have a narrow formation like this, you'll see a lot of players tend to have them on stay back while attacking. But I think it's very important, especially in a narrow formation, to have width in the team, right? Who in this team from the midfield on is going to be providing width? There's essentially no one is going to be doing that. And so that's where we absolutely need our left and right backs to be going up the field, providing width for us, because that can stretch the field. And I've actually scored goals and gotten assists, like a good amount of them, with these left and right backs and in these tactics. So again, it is very helpful in getting goals, getting assists, providing width, and just making sure that the defense is not always comfortable. For the defensive mid, we have them on stay back while attacking and cover center, which should not come as any surprise. That's pretty standard for a defensive mid, especially for one that is going to have us in a formation where left and right backs are going forward. But one instruction that is probably a little bit different is the positioning, right? We have them on free roam. Now, this is very helpful for the attack, because what will happen is, let's say, for example, we have the ball with Jesus Navas, our right back, or Tonali, our right center mid. They are going to be kind of in the corner, and we don't really have anyone to pass it to. Delaney, who our defensive mid is going to go over to that spot to provide a passing option. So that defensive mid is going to roam from side to side and provide a passing option, which is very helpful in case that we get trapped on one side or another. Keep in mind that that will mean that if you lose the ball in one of those instances with your defensive mid while he's at the side, that the middle of the field is going to be wide open for a counterattack. So just be aware of that. For the two center mids, we have them both on stay on the edge of the box for crosses and cover center, and we also have them both just on the balanced attack, so the default for the attacking support. I've noticed that these guys tend to be a little bit better as playmakers. However, it is also kind of helpful to have them run into the box for a late run occasionally, and so again, that's also why we have the players in the box tactic at 5, just because then I feel as though it's a little bit more balanced. They choose what's a little bit better, whether they stay on the edge of the box and just spray passes to our center attacking mid or two strikers, or perhaps an overlapping fullback, or if they actually make a late run into the box. So we tend to just kind of let them handle it for whatever they need to do. For our center attacking mid and our two strikers, I'm going to lump them all together since I kind of consider them all attackers in this case. Our center attacking mid is going to be on stay forward, and our two strikers are going to be on get in behind, while one of them is on stay forward. Now, for one of them being on stay forward, that's nothing more than providing a little bit more variance in our two strikers, right? So one of them is always going to be on stay forward, is always going to be kind of pressing that back line, while one might drop back a little bit. So again, it's just so the two strikers are a little bit less predictable. And again, there's a little bit more separation. So then there's, hopefully a little bit more creativity. It doesn't matter which person you have on stay forward. It doesn't matter which side you have them on. It doesn't matter if they're quicker, slower, have better passing, whatever it is, it just doesn't really matter. You choose whatever side you want to have them on and who actually is on stay forward. So that part is up to you guys. Next up, we have the types of players that are going to be important for this formation. So for the goalie and the 2 center backs, essentially whoever works for you is going to be good in this case. I probably would recommend the 2 center backs be a little bit quicker, since you are going to be pretty susceptible to counterattacks in this case, because again, the left and right backs are going to be bombing forward. But if you have maybe a slower center back who is just really, really good at defending and they work for you, then you shouldn't really have to worry about it. Now for the outside fullbacks, this is where it is pretty important to have a very specific player, someone who is very, very good at going forward, essentially kind of like the modern fullback. They need to have good work rates, they need to have good stamina. If you are going into a foot champs game and it goes into extra time, you may have to put in some subs from the bench, but essentially you just need them to be very good at going forward. That also means that the defensive type of fullback, like Mukiel for example, is not going to work in this case, because if they were staying back, then Mukiel would be decent. But because again they're going forward and Mukiel is not nearly as competent going forward as he is at staying back, then that means it's not going to work that well. So make sure you have good attack-minded fullbacks in this formation. For the defensive mid, I would say first and foremost, make sure they are just a good defensive mid, a pure defensive mid, someone who can defend, get the ball, someone who's probably maybe a little bit physical, taller, maybe a bully. So Delaney in that case is very good. He has low high work rates, that's great. But also it is recommended that they have some decent dribbling and passing, because keep in mind, we have that free roam instruction on them. So they will go from side to side and they will have to be somewhat decent on the ball in order to potentially, get past an opposition player, or to make a certain pass in order to get it to an attacking mid or potentially even a striker. So yes, make sure they are, number one, very good at defending, but it is recommended that they be decent on the ball as well. Now for the 2 center mids, I would recommend them both being kind of good at everything, or at least decent at something, but I would also recommend them being kind of specialized in going forward or at defending. So obviously Fekir, he's a lot better going forward than Tonali, and Tonali is a lot better at defending than Fekir. I personally think this is a little bit better, just because I would rather have someone who is really, really good at one aspect on the field rather than just above average or good at everything. I feel as though it's a little bit better in that case. And then finally for the center attacking mid and the strikers. Yes, the center attacking mid should be better at passing than shooting. Yes, the striker should be better at shooting than passing, but the striker should have some decent passing on them, and the center attacking mid should have some good shooting on them as well. In fact, the center attacking mid, and we'll show it in the gameplay, actually gets forward a decent amount. So make sure they have, a good weak foot, some skills, a good shot on them, so then that way they can actually, make those runs in, and then you can actually, score from those runs that they are making. In terms of the most important positions on the field, I would say probably your center attacking mid, your defensive mid, and your wing backs are probably going to be the most important in terms of at least like the types of players that you buy. You really need to make sure you're buying the right types of players in those cases, otherwise this whole formation could potentially fall apart. Lastly, we're going to take a look at some gameplay here, and I'm going to mention a few points that are very, very important about what to look for and what to be cautious about when you are using this formation. Now, one of the things you want to look out for in the attack is crosses. Believe it or not, they're actually very effective in this formation, probably because we have our left and right backs just bombing forward on the field, and if your opponent has a pretty high line, it's actually very good to exploit. So in this case, we're passing the ball up. We have obviously Ferland Mendy over here making this overlapping run. He also, as you can see, has a pretty high line. They're, fairly far out from the box here. So again, what we're going to do with our 2 strikers who are on get in behind is have them make these runs right here, right? We already had King Kazu who is making runs. Eto here is actually going to be the one who scores. And so what happens here is, again, we get the ball with Mendy here, and again, it's just a wide open cross. Now, I did not anticipate that it would make it for some reason because I thought the cross was bad, but the cross nevertheless was open in the first place, and so we were able to score from that. And so again, I do want to hammer home the point of looking for crosses because it is a pretty good option to have, especially when your opponent has a high line. So in this case, it doesn't even come from our fullback here. We actually just use our center attacking mid and we just burst forward with it. And look at this, again, because of their high line, we have all of this space here with Eto'o to make this run in behind, which is really nice. And again, it's from our center attacking mid. We don't have any overlapping fullbacks. It's just because his opponent has a very, very high line. And from here, he brings out a defender. And look at this, right? We have Eto'o making this wide open run. We can just send it on through, and believe it or not, wide open cross, and it's going to be a goal. Next up, I want to mention that you should be looking for the center attacking mid making good runs. I mentioned it in the instructions part of the video and in the types of players you're going to want, that the center attacking mid makes a good amount of runs forward. And in this case, this is what we're going to show. We actually start to get the ball with Fakir here, but instead of just directly passing it to our center attacking mid, we're actually going to bypass him and get it to Eto'o here, who then passes it to King Kazu. And so then our center attacking mid is going to make these great runs forward. And so when we play this at full speed here, you can actually see that again, we get it to Eto'o, we get the ball to King Kazu, and then again, this whole pass is going to be wide open. So again, make sure you are looking for those runs from center attacking mid. Now you may be thinking that, oh, it was early on in the game, it's probably just a kickoff thing, but again, this is later on in the game. It's not from a kickoff because obviously no goals have been scored. And so again, right, we just have the ball with Eto'o here, who kind of drops in deep. We have Tonali making a good run, meaning that the opposition left back is preoccupied here. He brings his left center back out. And so look at all of this space here that is looking to be exploited from our center attacking mid. So he makes this run, Nakamura makes this run into the wide open space. Again, we want to try to spot those runs from center attacking mid, which is exactly what happens here. He gets a wide open look. Now, unfortunately, his 3-star weak foot means that we hit the post and then he goes on to score from it, which is really, really stupid. I am absolutely annoyed by that. But one, it has a happy ending. We actually end up winning 4-2, which is great. But two, and most importantly, it's about finding those opportunities, right? I mentioned if you have a center attacking mid with a good weak foot, he's going to be making that, right? Obviously, again, Nakamura has a 3-star weak foot. You can't expect him to be hitting that every single time, whereas someone who does have a 4 or even potentially a 5-star weak foot, you can't expect him to hit that. So again, make sure you look at those runs from the center attacking mid. Lastly, I want to talk about something that you should be cautious about. I mentioned in the tactics section with the direct passing instruction or tactic that sometimes your left and right backs will bomb up the field when it doesn't really make sense to. And so that means you really have to watch out for not really having any attacking options and to being pressed. So in this case, you can see that we have Ferland Mendy here just making his way up the field for whatever reason. We didn't even go forward with the ball. We didn't make it further than, I think, this little section right here past the ref. Our defensive mid is going to be kind of isolated and he's not going to have a lot of people to pass to. And I'll show you what this means, right? So again, we pass it forward to Vinicius Jr. There's not really a lot of players to pass to. And again, right, we get closed down with his Kessié. And so from there, what do? Right? Again, we have this Ferland Mendy, who's almost as far up as the strikers. It doesn't really make sense to pass it to Jesus Navas here. Tonali's not really in a decent enough spot. We have our strikers too far forward. And so what this means is 3 things. You either have to, 1, just play it out from the back. You have to, 2, just boot the ball forward, or 3, you have to pass it all the way back to the goalie and just kind of reset the play. Now, depending on the scoreline and the situation of the game, obviously one of those 3 things is going to be fine, but you know, overall, it's probably safest just to pass it back to the goalie and just reset everything. So that is going to do it for this video, guys. Hopefully it helps you out. And again, if you do have any questions over this tactics video, just make sure to leave them in the comments down below and I'll try to answer them for you guys. But like I said, that is going to do it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. This has been DMG. Peace.